Today, I want to tell you about a genre you've never heard of. How can I be sure? Well, it's because I
made it the fuck up.
It's a genre I'm calling WEBCORE fiction. The name takes after the aesthetic movement, which started in the 2010s, inspired by the internet and gaming culture of the 90s and 2000s. WEBCORE and its many, many derivatives, Dreamcore, Futurecore Arrow, Y2K Futurism, are all love letters in different languages to a time when technology and the internet still had an imagination. The genre's core appeal to me is that the stories only take place in virtual worlds with virtual rules. Not realistic simulations where you can't tell what's reality or digital. But it's blatantly obvious that the environment behaves like the internet or a video game with programmed limitations, and this unique framework has so many cool applications in telling a narrative. WEBCORE fiction reminds me of when cyberspace was largely uncharted by megacorps and AI. It has that same ethereal weirdness of the endless datascape it once felt like. Now, the internet feels small, and new consumer tech gets more boring every year. This genre feels like a natural response to the corporate monochrome monotony of today's social media landscape. The internet used to feel like a fantasy world for escapism, but now it's infuriating, crowded, and manipulative with fake accounts, subscriptions, and AI slop. But I may have this dystopia we live in to thank for one of my favorite trends in art and storytelling. But what makes it so special and justifies its existence? WEBCORE fiction is not only an aesthetic, but a distinct genre with unique settings, tropes, themes, and character archetypes. WEBCORE fiction stories take place in a digital realm that actually behaves like a digital realm. This is what I like most about the genre, and I believe it's the most important factor to define it. Unlike sci-fi and cyberpunk stories that use some sort of cyberspace as a second thought plot device and take place in the physical world, WEBCORE fiction's primary and only setting is cyberspace. Whether that's a browser tab or a spooky video game, it's a virtual world with its own rules that's portrayed as a real world with its own agency and consequences, and with minimal input from an outside world, if any at all. Despite the name I'm proposing, I wouldn't consider WEBCORE fiction to be synonymous with the aesthetic. In that case, this category would be meaningless and oversaturated. I only care about the stories that take place in computers. Something like Cruelty Squad, albeit undoubtedly WEBCORE looking, doesn't take place in a virtual world with virtual characters or leverage virtual logic to move the plot. While a movie like Wreck-It Ralph, despite being mainstream, would technically be a WEBCORE fiction story to me. In WEBCORE fiction, the virtual world ignores realistic physics and indulges in the absurdity of computer logic, becoming a reality dictated by software commands and executions, glitches and backdoors, deletions and downloads. Things don't make sense because of how they would work in our world, but they make sense because it's in a digital world. No one can relate to living in a virtual world, but we can mostly understand how it works. However, this probably makes WEBCORE fiction hardly relatable to some people. It requires tech-savvy knowledge, even a bit more than the average person. It's difficult to appreciate references in the art, characters, and world building if you've never touched a computer, picked up a controller, or all you've known is the clean corporate internet of today that's automatic with artificial intelligence diluting human agency. In WEBCORE fiction, you tend to see characters moving computer icons and assets as if they were tangible items, or using file transfer systems and wires as instantaneous transportation. It's this genre's version of magical items and warp drives, basically. A character trope I've identified is the living program, similar to the animate inanimate objects tropes seen in cartoons. In sci-fi or fantasy, the author may try to justify a ghost in the machine as an artificial intelligence or haunted device. Not often in webcore fiction. Most of the time, the characters simply exist. They're not AI, like how we manufacture AI, nor are they human, obviously. This is where the line between sci-fi and fantasy in webcore fiction starts to lose its pixels. The genre itself is based on the old technology we have, and yet it tends to function like a fantasy world or a cartoon, as almost anything with a face or not could be sentient. Webcore fiction has its themes too, though it's hard to say since there aren't a lot of webcore fiction stories that I know. I can count the selection I have on one hand. Still, most of the time, webcore fiction stories tend to explore what it means to have a purpose or role to fulfill. It makes sense given that the nature of the setting is programmed. Our protagonist is most likely a digital entity with a designed purpose. They can choose whether to accept that or disobey their programming and the system's design. If the protagonist is human, they are typically a user, either viewing the virtual world through a screen or completely jacked in, and the outside world is almost completely omitted from the virtual setting. The user could be looking to exploit the virtual world, break the system, or escape. A human user's relationship with the virtual world is inherently different, whereas a living program might feel at home. Exploring through software, data channels, and folders, the user might see cyberspace as their sandbox to mold, or it's their personal hell. This isn't a deal breaker, of course. Genre is more fluid than rigid. There are webcore fiction stories that focus on the weird virtual reality, while disregarding any mentions of a physical world or clarifying that the setting is virtual, despite heavily resembling one. Genres are just patterns, and their fans create the guidelines based on their tastes. We identify genres based on the similarities that some stories show. That's how we find more movies, shows, games, and books we prefer. So, what is webcore fiction? Is it sci-fi? Is it fantasy? Neither, but its own thing. I consider webcore fiction a subgenre without an allegiance to sci-fi or fantasy or whatever, since it can either be about advanced tech, a fantastical world, horror, and it doesn't have to make scientific sense, real world sense, or any sort of sense. Just computer sense. So, in an effort to spread awareness of this niche and find more stories like it, I propose this definition. Webcore fiction. A subgenre of speculative fiction primarily set in a virtual world that functions like the old internet or a game simulation, embracing computer logic and arcade systems rather than realism. A real world is rarely, if ever, shown in the story. Webcore fiction is often nostalgic for the 90s and early 2000s internet's aesthetic and how it felt to use. Now, to prove I'm not talking out of my ass, I do have a list of media I believe classify as webcore fiction. Gonna go through them all and shout them out because they're all cool works of art that deserve attention. If you know any more webcore media, please share. Animator vs. Animation is an animated web series by Alan Becker, in which sentient computer animations fight each other, computer programs, video game NPCs, software glitches, and, of course, the animator. The sentient stick figures can make almost any digital item into a weapon. This includes icons plucked off the taskbar, game mechanics brought out of Minecraft, Microsoft Paint tools used to conjure walls out of thin code. No explanation is given as to why these stick figures are alive. They just are. we see a lot of interaction from a human character outside the computer, possibly even Alan himself. Sometimes these stick figures get themselves into trouble and trash his home screen. In the later episodes, there's a whole Black Ops cyberspace civil war going on inside this man's GPU. Wreck-It Ralph. Yep, the Disney movie. Taking place in an arcade, the characters inside the games intermingle by traveling through cables and meeting at extension cords as hub stations, and even use that to explore other people's games. The sentient PCs, playable characters, not the computer itself, and the NPCs have their roles to play. If their game shows too many problems to the human, as if someone is missing from the game, they get unplugged and everyone's killed. Deleted. Forever. Sheesh. Would it hurt the arcade owner to just hire a mechanic or a programmer or something to fix the machine? I suppose that would raise too many existential questions for the characters than Disney would be comfortable with. If you could just be fixed with programming whenever you started acting out of your role, what would be the point of your individuality? Hypnospace Outlaw is an alternate reality internet simulation game developed by Tendershoot, which takes place in a virtual world that allows users to surf the web in their dreams. It's pretty much the metaverse corpos today dream of. However, the Hypnospace is nothing like the sanitized, sleek, and smooth internet we have. Everything has a human touch, giving the sense that there's not only a human behind every account, but every website and forum you visit feels like an online flea market instead of a supermall. You play as an enforcer for the Hypnospace. You keep tabs on problematic users and venture to the darkest depths of the web to flush them out. Hackers, scammers, malware, and other malicious users are your enemies. Their secret crimes are a threat to Hypnospace security, and you're rewarded for poking around every hyperlink and website backdoor. Tendershoot is also developing a game of a similar premise, possibly in the same world, but probably not. It's called Dream Settler. It too sounds like WEBCORE fiction to a T. In Dream Settler, you solve crimes in the sleep net, where dreams are made. As a private eye, you'll help users uncover the mysteries plaguing their digital psyches, sifting through obscure websites, applications, and cache for clues. I have no idea when this will release, but I would keep an eye on it. And Future Red here. Apparently it's fucking canceled. Sorry. Broken Reality is a game developed by Dynamic Media Triad. It's Hypnospace, except 3D, and high as hell on vapor, wave, and LSD. In this game, a tech megacorp called Natum owns almost everything: your computer, the virtual world itself, and almost all services running on it. It's almost like this is a warning for an apathetic future to come. Despite being inspired by the 90s and early 2000s, Broken Reality borrows many modernist elements from today's internet. You collect likes as you surf the web. The more likes you have, the more you can afford to upgrade your account. Popularity is currency in Broken Reality, and it's your golden ticket to exclusive chat rooms. I also love the digital magic system in Broken Reality. It has the tropes of using digital mechanics and arcade rules to fight users, living programs, and malware-like enemies. Slashing ads with a katana, zipping across cyberspace like Spider-Man with your bookmarker. It's the perfect WEBCORE social media sim, meta parody, puzzle solver, action RPG. And look at that, they have a sequel coming. Will it actually release? I don't know, but I sure hope so. Analog is an animated web series created by Macho Boy. The story follows a studio called Ryanair Interactive Media, or REM, taking place in this strange reality where characters develop games as if they were building a film set. At least, that's what I gathered from watching it. The protagonist, or mascot rather, Analog is kind of like their test dummy bug hunter. Whatever she interacts with exposes the glitches and exploits in REM's game design. The logic of video game physics, like spawning, rendering, and whatever she says,
down on per pixel shaders for the engine, which put a lot of strain on the hardware. After I switched out the engine shader libraries and tweaked the vertex proximity detection, I was able to retarget the RGB values to their respective geometry's proper normals. And to wrap it up, the GPU flags across the draw calls have all been updated for the WYSIWYG operations.
Wow! You know how to get that close to the hardware?
Only a programmer would find that funny. This cartoon takes me back, though. It feels like watching a Saturday morning cartoon again, but one geared more towards adults who are familiar with code lingo and computer functionality. The show's aura carries itself as both a weird animation that Cartoon Network somehow got away with, and the Adult Swim short with haunting and charming visuals you can never get out of your head. Analog really is something special, and it's a pinnacle example of how you can use digital logic to tell stories. No audience is too small for a successful project. You just have to find the language that speaks to them. The Amazing Digital Circus is a web series created by Gooseworks and produced by Glitch Studios. It's about a cast of characters who are trapped in a digital circus because they, supposedly, put on a headset they can't take off. This show's tone of reality is surreal and absurd to the point where fans aren't sure if they're even the original versions of themselves or just copies. They all enter the circus through a VR headset, but they have little to no memories of the real world. They're constantly subjected to the chaotic, torturous whims of Kane's games, which are supposed to keep the constructs sane. If these digital minds go too long without stimulation, they might go brain dead, I guess. But mental erosion over the years increases the risk of becoming abstracted, an algorithmic, amalgamous abomination. Damned if they do, damned if they don't. Quite literally, this place is nothing but an inescapable hell. A divine comedy, you could say. With no perceivable outside, time is meaningless in this cyber circus. It could have been days, seconds, or centuries since their human minds were uploaded into the mainframe. That's if they were even human to begin with, or if there's even an outside world left, or if an outside world is even real. Imagine that. What if that's a dream meant to keep these constructs in line so that this digital deity, Kane, can have followers to amuse? Nah, but it represents WEBCORE fiction nicely. They explore a digital wonderland where they might no-clip through the ground into a limbo dimension of rigged assets. They explore unfinished levels that lead to the eldritch source code of the entire system. Kane uses his god mod powers to spontaneously delete or reprogram non-playable characters and change the simulation's rules according to his game's themes. And, spoiler alert, he may be capable of manipulating memory files after all. There is a possibility of a physical world out there, but this reality of ones and zeros is all they've known, and all they're allowed to know.
What did any of that mean?
Homepage is a multimedia indie project by Mini Mean Studios. It consists of animations, music, and a 3D platformer video game in development. The protagonist and mascot, Paige, has lived in the recycling bin her whole life. She takes her first step outside her program perimeters and explores the rest of the OS world within her processing grasp. I'm looking forward to seeing more from this project. I'm a huge fan of WEBCORE stories that focus on digital entities and lore without a human character present. It's almost second person because the story is set to be in your computer, but the immersion is so good that you can almost forget about that. Super Hot is a first-person shooter developed by the Super Hot team. It's perhaps the most simplistic yet complex shooter I've ever played, although I can't speak much for its lore because I don't understand much of it. There's a hacker, the game might be alive, but it is WEBCORE fiction. You're a player jacked into a trippy virtual world that wants you hooked like a fish. Super Hot is a first-person shooter that's highly aware of how unrealistic its game functions are. Its core gimmick is that time only moves when you move. It's not time travel or your superpower, it's a game rule to make the game fun. Every action you make counts, as you're surrounded by crystal red dudes to kill or neutralize. I have no idea who they are. It's endless. There is always more. Always a new level, no matter what you accomplish. Are you feeding data into an artificial intelligence, or is a hacker using your gameplay to intercept your systems? Do you care, as long as you're having fun? On the far end of the absurd, we have the animations of Geohex. The artist describes their work as animations that you will only see in your dreams, which perfectly encapsulates the essence of WEBCORE fiction. The world in Geo's animations resembles our own, albeit with a low poly texture, but at times, physics seems to break down randomly, following the logic of a dreaming computer. From a television opening a portal for nightmarish anomalies, to the goth character, Salem, haunted by reality warping entities. No explanation is given, it just is. These animations are like visual poems, short, emotional glimpses of a strange world to be experienced. I was feeling conflicted whether to slap my WEBCORE fiction label on it because I'm not entirely sure what the animator is going for. It's never explicitly said that their stories take place in a virtual world, however, it behaves like one, in my opinion, and that's what I like to see in this genre. Okay, one last example. If you're a fan of indie animation, you've probably heard of this creator's work and were expecting it to appear on this list. Let me introduce Ina by Joel G. Ina is about Ina, a girl, I think. Her world is as weird as you can stretch the word, and then some. Everyone, everything, everywhere is different. Living in dimensions inspired by liminal spaces, unfinished level designs, and Microsoft wallpapers. There's no sense of anything having flesh and blood or code necessarily. It's a world driven by intention, dreams, and humor. The cosmology of Ina is fascinating because it lives and moves like a simulation without any context that it is a simulation. Kind of like Analog, if it were higher than a kite. The way story presents the world is not only stylistic, but it is the reality. Every glitch, misshapen 3D model, text box, low poly texture, and corrupted item, it's all organic data in this retro realm. The world building is fluid and soft. The only consistency is strangeness and Ina's friendship with Mooney. Even without a concrete grasp on the lore, it's still entertaining and candy for the eyes. WEBCORE fiction is built upon the aesthetic, culture, and experience of the early internet. It's not just about how it looks, or the fact that it takes place in a simulated realm. This is what separates WEBCORE fiction from simulation and hacker sci-fi like The Matrix, Tron, or Sword Art Online even. Those stories, though containing cyberspace elements, don't invoke the experience of the early internet in retro technology. There's no other genre like it, never before in human history. Show your grandparent Indiana Jones, Star Wars, or even Demon Slayer for all things, and they'd be able to interpret what's going on, of course. However, give them something like The Amazing Digital Circus, Homepage, or Analog, which heavily rely on computer references, then they might struggle to connect with the story. The human element is still there, but webcore fiction has an understanding of computers, programming, and web surfing baked into its narratives. It's a genre that gatekeeps itself solely based on who owns a computer or not. On one hand, I love timeless stories that can transcend generations, but I do wonder how webcore fiction will fare decades or centuries later in a world where the internet is much different, or even dead. Deader than it already is. What will future generations make of this bizarre genre that was a love letter to a short stage in the internet's history? Aren't you forgetting one thing? What? No, I don't know what you're talking about. Yeah, you know, you're forgetting one movie that's probably webcore fiction. No, I'm not talking about that. No, you know the one. It does not exist. You know the one. I'm not talking about.